Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Wednesday, May 28th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today is looking pleasant, with a high of 78.3 degrees and a low expected to be 61.5, making it a comfortable day to be out and about. Later in the program, we'll explore the compelling reasons why King Charles delivered a rare speech to Canada, a significant address that has certainly caught the world's attention. Plus, we'll break down the key factors that continue to hold the U.S. housing market in a sluggish state, examining what this ongoing stagnation means for potential homebuyers and the wider economy. All these essential stories and much more as we continue our broadcast here on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. We have a compelling story for you this morning, hitting right at the heart of international relations and national identity. Yesterday, a rare and highly symbolic event unfolded in Canada, sending a powerful message across the border. For more on King Charles III's address to the Canadian Parliament, we turn to our reporter Ethan, who's been following this closely. Ethan, what can you tell us about this significant visit?
Grace, this was indeed a momentous occasion. Yesterday, May 27th, King Charles III delivered a rare address to the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa, Ontario. This was his very first visit to Canada as monarch, though it was his 20th trip to the country overall. According to reporting from the Star Tribune, the event was steeped in pomp and ceremony, including a horse-drawn carriage procession and a 21-gun salute. It was a clear affirmation of Canada's resolve to maintain its independence, especially given recent rhetoric from south of the border.
A 21-gun salute certainly sounds like a grand affair. Why was this particular address considered so rare and symbolic, Ethan?
Well, Grace, it is rare because the king serves as Canada's nonpartisan head of state, but he rarely opens Parliament. His mother, Queen Elizabeth II, performed this duty only twice during her long reign, in 1957 and 1977. So, for King Charles to do so, it speaks volumes about the current geopolitical climate and the importance of his message. The Star Tribune highlights just how infrequent this is. Prime Minister Mark Carney, a new leader who campaigned on confronting some aggressive stances from the United States, specifically invited the king to deliver this speech, aiming to use the visit to underscore Canada's distinct identity, as Scripps News and the Los Angeles Times uncovered.
So this wasn't just a routine royal visit, it was politically strategic. What exactly was the king's message, and how did it tie into Canada's sovereignty?
Precisely, Grace. It was very strategic. In his address, King Charles declared that the world has, quote, never been more dangerous and unstable, end quote, since the Second World War, stating that Canada faces, quote, unprecedented challenges, end quote. He acknowledged that many Canadians are feeling anxious and worried. But then, in a powerful affirmation of sovereignty, he quoted the national anthem, saying, quote, "The true North is indeed strong and free," end quote, as the Associated Press reported. He praised Canada's unique identity, its bravery, diversity, and kindness, noting its evolution into a bilingual and multicultural nation, fully independent from its British, French, and Indigenous roots.
That's quite a strong statement, echoing themes of independence. This seems like a clear response to U.S. President Donald Trump's repeated suggestions about Canada becoming the 51st state. Can you elaborate on that, Ethan?
You hit the nail on the head, Grace. The king's visit and speech are directly linked to Trump's rhetoric. President Trump has consistently floated the idea of Canada becoming the, quote, 51st state, end quote, framing it in terms of economic benefits and resolving trade disputes. For example, back on March 11, 2025, he posted on social media, quote, "The only thing that makes sense is for Canada to become our cherished 51st state. This would make all tariffs and everything else totally disappear," end quote. The Associated Press has been covering this extensively. He has even referred to former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as, quote, Governor Trudeau, end quote.
And how did President Trump react to the king's visit and speech yesterday, Ethan? Did he respond directly?
He certainly did, Grace. Just this morning, May 28th, President Trump seemingly responded via his Truth Social platform. He offered Canada a place in his proposed Golden Dome missile defense program, a system he announced would cost an estimated $175 billion US. He stated that Canada could join this program for, quote, $0, end quote, if it were to become the, quote, cherished 51st state, end quote, of the United States. He contrasted this with a $61 billion cost if Canada were to remain a, quote, separate but unequal nation, end quote, adding, quote, they are considering the offer, end quote. This was reported by the Star Tribune and other sources that detailed the Golden Dome program. It's quite the financial incentive, or, perhaps, a golden handcuff.
That's quite an offer, but also quite the ultimatum. How have Canadian leaders reacted to these annexation suggestions from President Trump, especially in light of the King's visit?
Canadian leaders have been absolutely unequivocal, Grace. Prime Minister Mark Carney and his predecessor Justin Trudeau have firmly rejected Trump's suggestions, emphasizing Canada's unwavering sovereignty. The Prime Minister's office swiftly issued a statement reaffirming that Canada has, quote, no plans to give up its sovereignty, end quote, and is, quote, not for sale, end quote. They called Trump's suggestion, quote, unserious, end quote, and, quote, deeply insulting, end quote, according to internal summaries. Prime Minister Carney also subsequently mentioned his hope for Canada to join the Rearm Europe plan by July 1st, which is just 34 days away, aiming to reduce dependence on the U.S. for military equipment and stimulate their own military industry. This is a very clear signal of their intent to diversify.
So while the rhetoric is certainly unsettling, what do foreign policy experts and diplomatic analysts make of Trump's 51st state comments? Is it a genuine threat or something else entirely?
Most experts view it as complex, Grace, but primarily as political posturing, a negotiating tactic for trade and defense spending disputes, or domestic political messaging, rather than a literal policy threat of annexation. Analysts suggest his statements are part of a disruptive approach to foreign policy, aiming to unsettle norms and capture attention, perhaps even to, quote, troll, end quote, Canadian leaders. Some even link it to his, quote, madman theory, end quote, of foreign policy, where erratic behavior is a tactic for coercion, as various geopolitical analyses suggest. While concerning, it's not seen as a credible imminent threat of military annexation, but rather a multifaceted form of political and diplomatic pressure. It seems like a very careful diplomatic dance is being performed on both sides of the border.
Fascinating, and certainly a situation to keep an eye on. Ethan, thank you for breaking down this significant story for us. We appreciate your insights.
My pleasure, Grace.
That was our first story of the morning. We'll be right back with more after the break. Now, shifting gears from the global stage to our own backyards, literally. We've been hearing a lot about the U.S. housing market being in a, quote, holding pattern, end quote. For a deeper dive into what that means for homeowners and prospective buyers, we turn to our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, what's the latest on this housing market slowdown?
Grace, it's a market that's got many on pins and needles. As of today, May 28, 2025, the U.S. housing market is in a deep, quote, holding pattern, end quote. According to National Public Radio, or NPR, April saw the slowest existing home sales in 16 years, fueled by economic uncertainty, high costs, and persistent tariffs.
That's quite a chill for a hot spring market. Can you elaborate on the affordability crisis? What are we talking about in terms of home prices and mortgage rates?
It's a double whammy, Grace. According to NPR, home prices have skyrocketed nearly 50% since before the pandemic. The median existing home price hit an all-time high of $414,000 in April. Mortgage rates recently ticked up to 6.86%, a stark contrast to pandemic lows.
6.86% is tough. Despite millions of jobs added, why aren't we seeing more sales? Is it purely about rates and prices?
Mostly, Grace. Lawrence Yun, chief economist of the National Association of Realtors, told NPR that, quote, pent-up housing demand continues to grow, though not realized, end quote. People are waiting for lower rates. This hesitancy impacts builders too. NPR reported a drop in single-family home construction in April.
So builders are also feeling the squeeze. What's causing these construction slowdowns, and are tariffs playing a role?
Absolutely, Grace. Tariffs are a big part. There's a 14.5% duty on Canadian lumber. Robert Dietz, chief economist at the National Association of Home Builders, or NAHB, estimates all tariffs add nearly $11,000 per single-family home. NPR detailed framing lumber costs are up 16% over a year ago.
$11,000 per home is substantial. What are builders doing to attract buyers given these challenges?
They're under pressure. A Wells Fargo and NAHB survey found 78% of builders reported difficulty pricing homes, 34% cut prices in May. Would-be home buyers, like Cassandra Ford mentioned in the NPR article, are delaying purchases. This sentiment is prevalent across public media, like IdeaStream Public Media and Houston Public Media.
Chloe, quote, holding pattern, end quote, sums it up. Is this a necessary market correction or just a temporary pause? What's the expert consensus?
Experts largely agree it's a bit of both, Grace. Arguments for correction cite rapid pandemic price growth and record-high existing home inventory. However, arguments for a temporary pause emphasize substantial pent-up demand, suppressed by high mortgage rates. It's a recalibration, not a full-blown crash.
That provides much-needed perspective. What steps are the federal government and industry groups taking to address these woes?
The Trump administration exempted Canadian softwood lumber from new reciprocal tariffs in early April 2025. However, existing duties at 14.5% remain, with a Commerce Department review in August or September, just a few months from now. Regulatory burdens, too, add thousands to home costs.
And what about regulations impacting housing costs?
Prior to this administration, stringent energy codes were introduced for federally financed homes, with compliance for single-family homes in November of this year, about 5 months from now. Groups like the NAHB estimate regulations account for nearly a quarter of a home's cost and are actively lobbying for reform.
Looking ahead, Chloe, what are the forecasts for the remainder of 2025 and into 2026? When can we expect to see the market potentially emerge from this, quote, holding pattern, end quote?
Well, Grace, it seems we'll be in this holding pattern for a while longer. Fannie Mae's May 2025 forecast projects mortgage rates to gradually decline. Sales and median prices are expected to rise modestly through 2026. However, Capital Economics cautions tariffs might keep rates near 7.0% for 2025.
It sounds like patience will be key for potential homebuyers and builders alike. Thank you for that incredibly comprehensive update, Chloe. Always appreciate you helping us build our understanding of these complex issues.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. First up, it seems the U.S. State Department is pausing new visa interviews for international students and exchange visitors. Secretary of State Marco Rubio ordered the halt to expand social media screening for these applicants. While existing appointments will proceed, new ones are on hold until further guidance, expected soon. Consular officers will review public social media posts, affiliations, and interactions. There is some concern this new vetting might be vague regarding what content could trigger extra scrutiny. This move is seen as part of a broader administration unfriending of international students and certain universities. A spokesperson confirmed serious vetting procedures are in place. However, this is expected to disrupt the plans of thousands, potentially delaying enrollments and causing headaches for universities reliant on international student tuition. India, a major source of U.S. students, could see significant disruption, and China urges the U.S. to protect the rights of its students. Speaking of academia, Harvard University is finding itself in a class of its own, and not in a good way. The Trump administration is canceling Harvard's remaining federal contracts, worth about $100 million, directing agencies to find alternatives by June 6th. This is the latest in an escalating feud, following a $2.2 billion freeze on Harvard's contracts and grants, and threats of another $450 million cut from an anti-Semitism task force. Reasons cited include alleged discriminatory hiring and failure to protect Jewish students, with President Trump criticizing Harvard as a, quote, hotbed of liberalism and anti-Semitism. Harvard, which has sued to block the initial funding freeze, arguing it's unlawful, had no immediate comment on this latest $100 million lesson. About 30 contracts are affected, distinct from research grants. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is promoting a Make America Healthy Again agenda, but critics say its actions are leaving a bad taste. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. highlighted processed foods' negative impact, calling it a quote in tribal communities due to limited grocery access, and emphasized making traditional foods available. Yet the USDA terminated the Biden-era Local Food Purchase Assistance Cooperative Agreement Program, or LFPA, which aided communities, including 90 tribal food banks, with local food access. A $500 million cut to LFPA in March was justified as the program being a COVID-era remnant. This has had a detrimental impact on tribal food programs. For example, the Menominee Nation lost $3 million for its tribal elder food box program. Critics say these cuts undermine the administration's own health goals. Other tribal USDA programs face cuts, and Maha food boxes are proposed to replace a senior food program, despite past criticism of a similar box idea being a recipe for disaster. Out in Gila County, Arizona, a staunchly Trump-supporting area, residents are wrestling with a pre-existing condition of their own: a deep reliance on Medicaid despite proposed Republican cuts. Nearly 4 in 10 residents there rely on Medicaid or CHIP. Now proposed House Republican cuts, potentially affecting over 10 million people, leave many locals conflicted. They value the safety net but also echo concerns about government spending. One rancher called losing Medicaid very bad for her husband, while others seek program revamping. This local sentiment reflects a national trend where even conservative voters acknowledge government's role in health care, making cuts a tough pill to swallow. And finally, it was another blast off then blast apart situation for SpaceX. The company's 9th Starship mega rocket test flight on Tuesday ended like 2 prior ones this year, with an explosion. While the rocket, featuring a reused Super Heavy booster, had a good initial ascent from Texas, a payload door malfunction nixed mock Starlink satellite deployment. The Super Heavy booster itself then crashed into the Gulf of Mexico in pieces. The Starship upper stage reached its suborbital trajectory, but then suffered an apparent propellant leak, lost pressure, and went into an uncontrolled spin before disintegrating over the Indian Ocean. Despite the fiery finish, CEO Elon Musk said valuable data was collected. The FAA reported no public injury. It recently increased approved annual Starship launches to 25. SpaceX will review data for future flights, crucial for its out-of-this-world Moon and Mars ambitions. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.